If I could bottle the exact moment my life cracked in half, it would be the sound of my daughter whispering, "Mom, you're not going to like this." It was my 68th birthday, and I was standing in the middle of a crowded restaurant, smiling for the cameras, holding a slice of tiramisu, completely unaware that the friend my husband had been staying with wasn't a friend at all. But the universe didn't rip off the bandage all at once. No, it let the truth drip, slow and cruel, until I was drowning in it. 3 days earlier, my husband Mark had texted me, "Babe, an old friend from college is in town. I'll spend the weekend catching up with him. Don't wait up." I stared at my phone for a while. A friend? Since when did Mark have old college friends I hadn't met in our 40 years together? When I asked who it was, he replied within seconds, "You wouldn't know her." Her. I told myself it was a typo. I told myself not to be paranoid. But a splinter of unease lodged itself under my skin. By Saturday night, I was at a long table at Luciano's, my favorite Italian place, surrounded by my children, their partners, and a few close friends. Laughter bubbled over wine glasses, forks scraped plates, and I could almost pretend that everything in my life was exactly as it should be. My son, Daniel, raised his glass and said, "To the strongest, most stubborn, most loving mom we know." Everyone clapped. I smiled, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw something strange. At the bar, near the back, a man was leaning in close to a woman with long, auburn hair. The woman's hand was resting on his thigh in that lazy, familiar way you only touch someone you've been with for a long time. The man looked just like Mark. My heart stumbled. No, it couldn't be him. He'd said he was in another city. My palms began to sweat, and I almost dropped my fork. My daughter Emma noticed. She followed my gaze, her expression freezing. Then she leaned toward me and murmured, "Mom, that's not some friend. You're not going to like this." I gripped the edge of the table. "Emma, who is she?" She hesitated, chewing her lip. That's Aunt Julia." The words clanged in my ears. Aunt Julia. My sister. The air left my lungs. It felt like someone had poured ice water down my spine. No, you're wrong." Emma's eyes softened. "I wish I was." I turned back toward the bar, just in time to see Mark brush a strand of hair from Julia's face, his thumb lingering against her cheek. She smiled at him the way I used to smile at him before 40 years of shared history turned us into roommates who still wore wedding rings. I wanted to stand up, I wanted to scream, I wanted to drag him by the collar to our table and demand an explanation in front of every single person there, but my body refused to move. Then, the waitress walked over with a large, ribbon-tied gift bag. "This is from the gentleman at the bar." My hands shook as I pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, nestled in cream satin, was a gold bracelet with the words, "Always yours," engraved on the inside. It was the same bracelet Mark had given me on our 10th anniversary. Only this one wasn't for me. For a moment, the restaurant noise faded into a low, muffled hum, like I was underwater. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. My fingers tightened around the bracelet until the engraving bit into my skin. Emma reached for my hand. "Mom, don't." But it was too late. 40 years of holding my tongue evaporated in an instant. I stood up so fast my chair screeched against the floor. The sound sliced through the chatter around our table, and suddenly, every eye was on me. Mark still hadn't noticed me. He was leaning in, laughing at something Julia had said, his hand resting on her lower back in a way no brother-in-law should ever touch a woman. I walked toward them, each step measured, deliberate. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor like a countdown. When I stopped beside their table, Julia froze first. She turned her head toward me slowly, the color draining from her face. "Linda, what are you doing here?"
I held up the bracelet between two fingers. My voice was steady, but my throat burned. Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing. Mark's head snapped toward me, his expression shifting from surprise to something sharper, annoyance. Linda, we can talk about this later. No, we're going to talk about it now. In fact, we're going to talk about it in front of everyone. A couple at the next table exchanged looks. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. The room was suddenly too quiet. Linda, Mark said, his voice low, as though speaking to a stubborn child. This isn't the place. Seems like the perfect place. After all, you chose this place to celebrate, what, your girlfriend? Or should I say, my sister? Julia's lips tightened. It's not what it looks like. I turned to her slowly. Julia, unless the two of you are rehearsing for a play called How to Destroy a Marriage, I think it's exactly what it looks like. Her eyes flickered toward Mark, as if silently pleading for him to say something, anything, that would make this go away. But Mark just sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the problem. You've been paranoid for years, always suspicious, always assuming the worst. Julia and I cut him off. Don't you dare blame this on me. Don't you dare make this my fault. By now, Daniel had walked up from our table, his face tight with confusion. Dad, what's going on? Mark's mouth opened, then closed. Julia stared down at the floor. I turned to my son, my voice trembling. What's going on is that your father has been spending his weekends with your aunt, and not in the family bonding kind of way. Joking. Do I look like I'm joking? I asked. Emma had joined us too, crossing her arms. I told you, Mom, I saw them weeks ago at the farmer's market. They were holding hands. I didn't want to believe it either. Mark's head whipped toward her. Emma, that was supposed to stay between us. Between us? Emma's voice cracked. Dad, you begged me not to tell Mom because you knew it was wrong. Don't twist this. Julia finally looked up, her voice trembling. Linda, it just happened. We didn't mean for it to. You didn't mean for it to? I repeated, my laugh bitter. You've been my sister for 64 years. You stood beside me at my wedding. You know what Mark means to me, and you didn't mean for it to? She looked like she might cry, but my sympathy was long gone. Mark reached for my arm. Let's go outside. We can sort this out privately. I stepped back. No, you humiliated me publicly. You can live with the fallout publicly. People were openly staring now, whispering over their half-eaten plates. Somewhere a phone camera was raised. Then Daniel turned to his father, voice tight. Dad, please tell me you're not leaving Mom for Aunt Julia. Mark hesitated just long enough to make my stomach drop. Julia stepped in, her tone softer. It's not about leaving anyone. It's complicated. I stared at her. No, Julia, it's actually very simple. You sleep with someone else's husband, you break your sister's trust, and you destroy two families in the process. Nothing complicated about it. Before Mark could respond, the waitress approached again, this time holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. This is for the lovely couple at the bar, she said cheerfully. I looked at the label. It was Veuve Clicquot, Mark and Mai's special occasion champagne, the one we'd shared every anniversary for decades. The smell of betrayal was suddenly overwhelming. I picked up one of the glasses, held it for a moment, and then poured it straight on the bracelet in my palm. The gold glistened under the amber liquid before clattering back into the box. I closed it, set it on the table between them, and said, Happy anniversary, you two. Enjoy it while it lasts. Then I walked out without looking back. The night air outside Luciano's hit my face like a slap. I wasn't sure if I was shivering from the cold or from the fact that I had just detonated my own birthday dinner in front of half the town. I had made it to the corner when I heard my name. Linda, wait! Mark's footsteps pounded the pavement behind me. I didn't stop walking. "You've made your point," he said, breathless, finally catching up. "Now let's just talk before you make this worse." I spun around. "Worse? You think I'm the one making it worse?" He held up his hands like I was some volatile bomb he needed to defuse. "You just humiliated us in public. You made a scene." I cut him off. "No, Mark. You made a scene when you decided to sneak around with my sister. I just put the spotlight where it belongs." The door to the restaurant swung open behind us, and Emma came out, her face flushed with anger. "Dad, stop blaming her. You and Aunt Julia are the only ones who should be embarrassed tonight." Daniel stepped out right after her, looking torn. "Mom, maybe we should hear him out before—" I turned to him sharply. "Before what? Before he gives me some excuse about how it just happened?" Mark shifted his weight. His eyes darted toward Daniel, almost like he was searching for an ally. "Danny, your mother has a history of overreacting. Don't you dare," I said. "Don't you dare try to turn this into me being the crazy wife." That's when Emma crossed her arms and said something that made my stomach churn. "Mom, I didn't tell you this before because I didn't want to hurt you, but I think this has been going on for years." The words sliced through me. "Years?" She nodded, glancing at Mark. "When I was in college, I came home one weekend early. I heard Dad in the kitchen laughing with someone. I thought it was you, but when I walked in, it was Aunt Julia. She was sitting at the table in your robe." Daniel's head snapped toward Emma. "You never told me that." Emma's voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to believe it. I convinced myself it was innocent. But after tonight—" She trailed off, shaking her head. Mark's face hardened. "This is ridiculous. That was nothing. Julia had spilled coffee on her clothes. Linda lent her a robe." "I never lent her anything," I said flatly. "If she was wearing my robe, it's because she went into my closet herself, or you brought it to her." Mark opened his mouth, then shut it again. Daniel stepped forward. "Dad, how long?" Silence. The kind that stretches so long you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. Finally, Mark looked at the ground. "We reconnected about 5 years ago." My knees almost buckled. 5 years. That was before my hip surgery, before our last big anniversary trip, before I had started blaming myself for why he'd seemed so distant. I took a step back, my voice shaking. 5 years. While I was taking care of my mother in hospice? While I was going through physical therapy? While I choked on the words. Emma's eyes were wet. "Dad, how could you?" Mark's voice was suddenly sharp, defensive. "You don't understand. Your mother and I, things weren't working. We were living like strangers. Julia was easy to talk to." I laughed bitterly. "Easy to talk to? Is that what they call it now?" He ran a hand over his face. "It wasn't supposed to get this far, but Linda, you've been so cold, so busy." "Stop," I said. "Just stop. You don't get to rewrite history to make yourself the victim here." Then Julia appeared in the doorway, clutching her purse like a shield. She walked toward us, her heels clicking against the sidewalk. "Linda, I'm sorry. I love him." I stared at her. "You love him? You've been sleeping with my husband for half a decade, and you think you get to use the word love." She swallowed. "I didn't plan it, but maybe we're meant to be." The audacity of it made my vision blur. And that's when I decided that if they thought they could just walk off into the sunset after blowing up my life, they were about to find out exactly who they were dealing with.
Julia's words, "maybe we're meant to be," looped in my head like a taunt I couldn't turn off. For 40 years, I had built a life with Mark. Now, in the middle of my birthday weekend, my own sister was standing in front of me, claiming she'd been handpicked by fate to replace me. I didn't cry, not in front of them, Not when Mark had that smug, cornered look on his face, and certainly not when Julia's hand inched toward his like she thought they were some tragic, star-crossed pair. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and said, "Then I guess fate has terrible taste." I turned to walk away again, but Daniel stepped between us. "Mom, please, can we all go home and talk like adults?" I met his eyes. Adults don't sneak around for 5 years behind the backs of the people who love them. Adults don't humiliate their spouses in public and call it destiny. So no, Daniel, we're not doing this in private. Emma came to stand beside me, folding her arms. Mom's right. This doesn't deserve a polite family meeting. This deserves consequences. Julia's jaw tightened. "Emma, I'm still your aunt. I've loved you your whole life." Emma cut her off. "You don't get to play the family card now." Mark's voice hardened. "Enough. Emma, you're letting your mother fill your head. You haven't heard my side." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, please, Mark, you've had 5 years to give me your side, and you chose silence." Daniel sighed and ran a hand over his face. "Dad, Mom's not wrong. You should have ended things with Aunt Julia or told her it wasn't going to happen years ago." "Danny," Mark said, lowering his voice like we were in some confidential business meeting, "you don't understand marriage. Your mother and we stopped connecting. I was lonely. Julia was there. She cared." My nails dug into my palms. "You mean she was convenient?" Julia flinched, but then she straightened and said, "Linda, we can keep tearing each other apart out here, or we can act like civilized women and move forward. Mark and I want to be together. You deserve someone who—" I stepped closer until I was almost nose to nose with her. "Finish that sentence, Julia, and I'll give these people something to really stare at." She shut her mouth. Inside, the restaurant windows reflected our little standoff, the birthday decorations still visible behind us. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to let them ride off into some romantic fantasy while I looked like the bitter, discarded wife. I was going to dismantle whatever they thought they had, piece by piece, and I wasn't going to rush it. Emma must have seen something change in my expression because she whispered, "Mom, what's your thinking?" I whispered back, "That they're about to learn I don't lose quietly." Mark must have sensed the shift too, because his tone turned cautious. "Linda, don't do anything rash. We can work something out. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I smiled in a way that made him frown. "Oh, I'll be taken care of. Don't worry about that." He looked uneasy for the first time all night. "Linda," I turned to Emma. "Sweetheart, can you get the bill for the table and make sure they box up all the leftovers? Every bite. I paid for that dinner and I'm not leaving them a crumb." Mark's mouth twitched like he wanted to say something, but I was already walking back toward the door. When I returned inside, people tried to avoid looking at me, but curiosity won. Whispers floated around the room. I took my seat at the head of the table, still littered with birthday cards and half-empty wine glasses. Emma slid in next to me. "So, what's step 1? I glanced toward the bar where Mark and Julia still stood in the doorway, not sure whether to follow me or give me space. "Step 1, I said, picking up my phone, "is making sure they realize that nothing they've built was ever theirs to keep." And with that, I opened my messages and began typing to a number Julia had no idea I still had, one that would blow the first crack into their perfect little illusion.
The number I texted belonged to Ethan, Julia's ex-boyfriend from just before she started sniffing around my husband. I'd met Ethan twice, once at a family BBQ when Julia paraded him around like he was the love of her life, and again at my niece's wedding, where he spent the whole evening looking like he wanted to throw Julia into the cake. My message was short and to the point. "If you still care about the truth, meet me at my place tomorrow at 10 a.m. Julia has been with my husband for 5 years, and there's something else I think you should know." Emma peeked over my shoulder. "Mom, Ethan, as in that Ethan?" I gave her a cool smile. "Exactly. If anyone knows what Julia's capable of, it's him. And if she's been lying to Mark about her past, well, I'd love for him to hear it straight from someone she can't manipulate. Emma's grin turned sly. This is going to be good. When the bill came, I paid it without a word. Every last penny on my card. The same card that, incidentally, Mark no longer had access to. That was step 2. Cut off the perks he'd gotten used to while keeping me in the dark. We walked out with all the leftovers boxed neatly, my hands full of tiramisu and breadsticks, while Emma carried the pasta trays. Mark and Julia were still by the door, clearly debating whether to follow us or lick their wounds somewhere else. Mark finally stepped forward. "Linda, please, can we just—" I brushed past him. "Save your breath. You'll need it to explain yourself to Ethan." He froze. "Ethan? What is he—" Julia's head jerked up, her face draining of color. "You didn't—" I smiled without stopping. "Oh, I did." The next morning at exactly 10 a.m., Ethan pulled up in a beat-up silver sedan. He was taller than I remembered, with the kind of permanent frown lines that told me life hadn't been particularly kind since Julia. I invited him in, poured him coffee, and laid it out. Every detail. Every weekend Mark claimed to be away with the guys. Every family gathering where Julia and Mark found excuses to disappear at the same time. Ethan listened quietly, but his jaw tightened with each sentence. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and said, "She's been feeding him the same lies she used to feed me. Did she tell him she never wanted kids?" I frowned. Why would that matter? He smirked bitterly. "Because the last time I saw her, she was telling me she'd only left me because I didn't want kids," which was a lie. She didn't want kids, she just wanted someone to bankroll her lifestyle. If your husband thinks she's going to play stepmom to your grown kids or grandmother to your grandkids, he's in for a rude awakening. And that's when he dropped the real bomb. "She's been seeing someone else while she's been with your husband." The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hand. "What?" He nodded grimly. "A guy named Trevor. Works at that new golf club. She was meeting him there last month. I didn't tell you before because, well, we weren't exactly friends. But if you want proof, I've got pictures." Emma, sitting across from us, leaned forward. "Send them to me. I'll make sure Dad sees them at just the right time." He was impressed. "You've got your mom's fire." I sat back, letting the information sink in. Julia wasn't just trying to steal my husband. She was playing him the same way she'd playing every other man in her life. And soon, he was going to see exactly who he'd thrown his marriage away for. That evening, I called Daniel. "Sweetheart, can you come by tomorrow? There's something I want you to hear." He sounded wary. "Is this about Dad?" "Yes, and I promise you, after tomorrow you won't see him or Julia the same way again." He hesitated, then sighed. "All right, I'll be there." By the time I hung up, my plan was clear. Tomorrow, I'd have Ethan, both my children, and Mark in the same room. Julia, too, if she was brave enough to show her face. It wouldn't just be a conversation. It would be a reckoning. The next afternoon, my living room felt charged, like the air right before a thunderstorm. Emma was curled up in the armchair to my left, arms crossed but eyes bright with anticipation. Daniel sat on the couch opposite me, looking tense, but trying to keep his voice calm. Ethan leaned against the wall, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone like this was just another Tuesday. Mark arrived first, his suit jacket neatly pressed, as if he thought dressing up might somehow soften the blow. Julia came in a few minutes later, wearing a cream blouse and pearls, trying, I suppose, to look innocent. The two of them sat side by side on the couch next to Daniel, though he scooted an inch away from Julia the second she settled in. Mark cleared his throat. "Linda, I'm here because you said it was important. I'm hoping we can keep this civil. Oh, it'll be civil, I said, my voice sweet as sugar. Just honest. Julia opened her mouth, but Ethan straightened from the wall and said, "Yeah, honest is exactly what this needs." Mark turned toward him, frowning. "Why is he here?" "Because I invited him, and because apparently you're not the only man Julia's been keeping warm at night." Mark's brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan smirked and pulled out his phone. "Here. Pictures don't lie." He tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward Mark. The color drained from my husband's face as he stared at photo after photo. Julia, laughing at a golf club patio with a tall, tanned man in a polo shirt. Julia holding his hand in the parking lot. Julia kissing him by the hood of his car. Daniel sat forward, eyes wide. "Is that?" Ethan supplied the name. "Trevor. She's been seeing him for months, maybe longer. Well, she's been telling you she's your happily ever after." Julia's voice went sharp. "Those pictures are taken out of context." Ethan chuckled darkly. "Yeah, kissing someone in a parking lot is very easy to take out of context." Mark turned to her, his voice low but tight. "Is this true?" She stammered. "Mark, he's just a friend." I let out a soft laugh. "Ah, yes, the just a friend line. How poetic, considering that's exactly what you were supposed to be to me." Emma smirked from her chair. Daniel leaned back slowly. "So, you blew up our family for someone who was also cheating on you?" Mark's jaw clenched, his hands gripping his knees. "Julia, is this why you kept pushing for me to put your name on the condo paperwork?" Julia's eyes flashed. "Don't twist this. I love you." Mark laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it. "You love whoever keeps you in champagne and handbags." Her lips pressed together, but she didn't deny it. I stood then because I wanted the next part to land while I was looking both of them in the eye. "Mark, you left me emotionally long before you admitted it out loud, but you also left me financially vulnerable. That was a mistake." I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded document, and handed it to him. "That's the revised property settlement agreement my lawyer drew up yesterday. You'll sign it today. I'm keeping the house, the cabin, and my retirement accounts. You can take your car and whatever's in your personal checking. And before you protest, remember I have no reason to be generous to a man who's been lying for 5 years and was dumb enough to be lied to himself." Mark skimmed the paper, his eyes widening. "This is more than fair," I interrupted. "And if you don't sign it, well, these pictures will look great attached to a public court filing." Ethan handed me his phone so I could scroll through the photos. "I'll email you the originals. That way they don't get lost." "Much appreciated," I said. Julia's face was pale now. "Linda, please." "No," I said simply. "I'm done giving you space in my life. You can have each other if you want, but now he knows exactly who you are. And so do I." Mark signed the papers without another word. He didn't look at Julia once as he left. When the door shut, Julia just stood there for a moment, her eyes darting between me and the others. "You're making a mistake," she said finally. I smiled. I made one once. I married the wrong man. But I fixed it. She left without another word. When they were gone, Emma let out a low whistle. "Mom, that was savage." Daniel shook his head slowly. "I can't believe all of it." Ethan grinned. "Believe it, and be glad you've got a mother who doesn't just survive, she wins." I sank back into my chair, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. Because the truth was, I hadn't just taken back my dignity. I'd taken back the ending to my own story, and made sure I was the one writing it.